Right. All right, so welcome everybody. This is the DC Caucus of Rank and File Educators training on the WTU elections. This is definitely meant to be kind of open, like I'm not the be all end all expert on all this. So certainly if you have information you want to share or experiences, definitely happy to hear them. And we are recording it and we'll eventually put it up on YouTube and probably use some of it in social media just to share bits and pieces of the information we're going over. And also looking for feedback on the kind of model or how we're doing it so that we can definitely meet everyone's needs. This is the first time we're going through this, so definitely open for feedback. All right. Oops, sorry. So part of just the question, is thinking about like why you might want to run or what you want to see and how you can be the change that you do wish to see. So as we'll talk about, change can come in a lot of different forms and a lot of different ways. And there's all sorts of different amounts of time that you could dedicate to the union and making a change in the union. That we'll see from all these different positions that are all really important in keeping our union active and our membership active. So a few things, I'll start with the norms. We just always assume best intentions. Feel free to type stack in the chat if you wish to speak. We're a small group, so you could also just come off mute, but stack will at least help me kind of know you'd like to talk. And then you could also just write comments or questions in the chat if you don't wish to unmute. What I'll be kind of going over and hopefully having a conversation about is general information, positions, the roles and responsibilities, timeline process and rules, and working with DCCORE, if that's something you wish to do. So the first thing is you have to be, as in you have to be a member of the Washington Teachers Union to run and to vote. Cannot think you are, you have to know that you are, as I'm sure everyone in this space is aware, but just for those who aren't here right now, it's always good to check your pay stub. I have been part of campaigns and heard of people who something had happened, they had been a member and then they weren't. It's just good to check a pay stub and make sure that in the after-tax deductions, you have the DU/A of teachers local number 6, and you should see $36.08. If that is not there, you are not a member. Things happen, but then you got to make sure to fix it ASAP. The next really big thing, and the reason why we're doing this with DCCORE, is because we really believe everyone's vote matters. And in the WTU, in the past election, turnout was very, 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 very low. We only received an email that said who won as members, but because I was a member of the executive board, I received a more in-depth report based on a elections complaint. And that was where I was able to find the actual result numbers that the AFT provided when responding to that complaint. And we can see that they said, and this is just cut and pasted directly from that report, 652 ballots were returned. And duplicates and ineligible ballots were removed. So that then led to the current slate that was elected with Elizabeth Davis receiving only 349 votes total. So that just means that you can make a difference by running and you can make a difference by voting, and that every vote really does count. One thing that you want to make sure to do is to check in with the WTU and make sure that they have your current mailing address. especially if you've moved in the past 3 years since the last election, I would go ahead and check. And you could email vkilby@wtulocal6.net and give her your current mailing address and ask her to update the database. And they have this at the bottom of every morning brew. So it is the process that they're using. So I would just suggest using it if for any reason you believe that the W-2 might not have your current mailing address. So the next thing I just wanted to quickly go over was just some terms that we might start using as we're thinking about like elections. And you may have seen if you read anything that the WTU Elections Committee has already sent out. In the Washington Teachers Union, groups of candidates can form what's known as a slate, meaning that they run together. So what this usually means is that at the top of the ballot, there'll be lots of columns, and at the top, there will be the name of the slate. It could be the Liz Davis slate, it could be the DCCORE slate, it could be whatever you want to call it, slate. The important thing is every candidate who's running on that slate would put it in the nominations form, which we'll talk about. And it allows everyone to vote or run together. It's meant to make it simple for voters. They can just check the box at the top for the whole slate, and that means they voted for everyone on that slate. You can run as a full slate, which means every single position from president, executive board, board of trustees is full. You can also run a partial slate where it could be 2 people to maybe 50% or even more of the slate is full. And as a voter, you can vote for the whole slate, or you can actually pick candidates from different slates as long as you don't check any of the boxes at the top. You could vote for the president from one slate, vice president from another, treasurer from a third. Like you can mix and match as much as you want to your heart's content. Candidates can also just run as individuals, and they would kind of just be off. There's like usually slate, 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 and then kind of a column where the individuals show up. So that's just some terminology there. This is thinking about the different positions that I'm going to be going over more in depth, especially if there's ones that interest anyone. Just kind of doing an analysis. It is my opinion, so just based on my own experience, certainly open to changing some of these responsibilities. But part of what you want to think about when you're thinking about running for office is, well, what do I want to achieve? What do I hope to achieve? Is my goal to really have a lot of responsibility and have a big opportunity for change across the whole district? Or maybe my focus is really about the local school level and my local school in particular, and I want to make changes there. Then I also have to think about the time that I would be able to commit to the position. Do I have a lot of time? And in fact, I want to leave the classroom and be full-time and take a leave of absence, potential amount of time. Or do I want to stick with a lower time commitment, maybe having 3 to 4 hours per month, which usually is the baseline, I would say, for these positions, because some of the meetings can run long. And then you'd hopefully want to prepare for the meetings in some way, but that could be, a varying level of preparation depending on how you view your role, should you be elected. So here you can see that this is, and schools can certainly vary, but on average, kind of a middle, amount of time commitment per month, and that the opportunities for change are really focused on the local school. I'm sure those of us on personnel committee, we're already starting to meet, so it kind of ramps up at certain times of the year. Some schools, this is a very busy and time-intensive committee, and some it's not. So as I said, these are changeable for your position or where you are. We then have the more citywide or district-wide positions, which again, I'll be going over these ones in particular a bit more in depth, but you can kind of see maybe they're the opportunity for change goes up a little bit with different ones. But the amount of time is arguably on the lower end of the scale. The president and general vice president do take leaves of absence, as we'll talk about, and receive stipends. Treasurer and secretary have a little more responsibility on the executive board as well. Elections committee has a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of work. And then of course there's the building rep, which many people in this space are right now. As we know, that's a lot of work. And you actually get to have change across the district and a lot of voice in your school, which is why I kind of placed it down here, because there is a lot of responsibility for your school, but you also really do get quite a voice at the district level. And I would argue that the building rep really is the backbone of the union. It's what makes it tick. So it's just something to kind of think about. You know, of course, we've got all of these citywide positions, but when it comes down to it, the building rep gets to be in a lot of these spaces, takes on a lot of responsibility at their local school, and has a big opportunity to make a lot of change. All right, so the upcoming elections. There's a lot that we'll be able to vote and run for this year. We have the WTU Executive Board and Board of Trustees. We have the building reps, the delegates, SCAC, LSAT Personnel Committee, which are up for election every year at the building level. We'll be going more into this, so that's why I'm just kind of skimming over it now, which is kind of an overview. We also have the Elections Committee and delegates to the AFL-CIO. I'm not sure about AFT. I'm a little confused on the timing of some of these. And again, I'll talk more, but there'll be opportunity to see more in depth. So here, I'm hoping to make it a little more interactive. So what we've got is starting with the president. It's the position that we all probably think about the most. The president does get a leave of absence if they win. That means that they leave the classroom, but are continued to be paid their DCPS salary by DCPS, and the Washington Teachers Union reimburses DCPS for the benefits and salary. So basically all of that stays the same. And currently the president also receives a stipend as determined by the WTU Executive Board. The WTU president is the chief executive officer of the union. They're also the presiding officer at all meetings of the membership, executive board, and building rep assembly. What this means is that the president only votes in the event of a tie. So while they're the presiding officer and they're in all of these meetings and have a great deal of control over how the meetings go, they do not have a vote unless there is a tie. The president shall serve as the chief or serves as the fiduciary of the union and chief negotiator of the contract. They supervise all employees, and this is just coming out of the bylaws. So I guess I just wanted to hear from people here, like, what do you think, or what are you looking for in a president? What would make a good president? Oops, sorry, and it's moving. Take notes. Either type it in the chat or you can unmute and just say what you think. Someone who listens to members, yeah. Integrity, commitment to social justice, strategic thinking. I know I'm a bit more of a believer in ladders. I want someone who can demonstrate in-depth knowledge and commitment to the WTU.
Laura, I have a question.
Yep.
And I know it's been talked about, and I know it's public information somewhere, but I'm a little too lazy to look. What is the presidential stipend?
It's
How much
currently
is it?
$70,000 a
Oh,
year.
on top of your salary.
I would be a board
Okay,
member who's always voted against that, but yes.
okay. Let me go on mute so you won't hear.
Nope. But that is determined by the WTU executive board. So it doesn't have to be that way. It just is at the moment. Would anyone else like to share thoughts on just what you're looking for in a president? I mean, we know the fact is that the president is going to have to be willing to give themselves 100% to the WTU. I mean, that's, if you want this, then you're willing to really hand your life over to the WTU for a few years, because that is what will happen. Be willing to fight, know the bylaws, know DC political landscape, yeah. Know and follow the bylaws, yep. It's all good. So next we have the vice president, the general vice president, excuse me. The general vice president also has a leave of absence, and they also get a stipend. It is currently, I believe, $35,000 a year on top of their salary. The official role, as outlined in the bylaws, is here on the left. They perform other duties as delegated by the president or assigned by the executive board. They oversee and assist the building reps and field reps in their duties, supervise the field representatives and other employees as designated by the president, perform all the duties of the president in the absence of the president, and convene the elections committee. Arguably, this is the organizer in chief of the Washington Teachers Union. Historically, this perform other duties has often meant that they serve as a field rep on top of supervising field reps, which has not always worked out the way that the bylaws are written, and has kind of led to challenges for vice presidents, because sometimes they're treated as staff members and not elected members of the organization. And sometimes there have been falling outs between presidents and vice presidents where then they really get treated like staff. But in at least my opinion, this really is the person who would be organizing kind of the field work, right? The ground game, getting buildings kind of ready for contract fights, knowing what's going on and building member power. This would be the position where they could do that full time. So similar question, like what would you look for in a vice president?
Laura, I'm just hesitating because I feel like a lot of what was listed in the chat would also be something that I would look for in a vice president.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say that, Sarah. I was going to say, because look at what just happened recently. So the person who has to step up to the plate in the event that something happens to the president, you have to be presidential ready. You have to be ready for the position from day one.
I think for me, I want someone who's really willing to work in buildings and grow member power. I mean, yes, I want a president who wants that as well, but I don't need a president to be in the buildings doing that necessarily, since they have a whole organization to run. I need a vice president to be doing that full time, overtime, all the time, in my opinion. Any other thoughts on the vice president? They should be the organizers, at least at heart, because this is what they are supposed to be doing, is organizing our union to fulfill the vision set by the members and channeled through the president. Something along those lines. So these are the two leave of absence positions that requires a major change in your life. The next set of positions on the board do not. And we can probably go through these a bit more quickly. So secretary, I can speak to as the current secretary. There is no leave of absence, so you maintain your job at your school, full time. You do receive a stipend. I've currently rejected mine, but you do receive a stipend. It comes out to $500 a month for turning in your minutes, both for the building rep assembly, general membership meetings, and executive board meetings. So if you turn in your minutes, you get paid. So there aren't too many official responsibilities of the secretary beyond being responsible for the recording and filing of the minutes from all meetings and building reps meetings, and assisting the president in handling the correspondence of the organization, which has not happened in my experience. Seems like they got a handle on it, I guess. I know what I look for is someone committed to transparency, and to just making sure the minutes are being kept and they're accurate, and probably also just being a fast writer, because our meetings don't always follow a clear logical order, and you have to somehow be able to capture what's going on. I don't know if there's anything else people look at for a secretary. I think you also need consistency, like you have to be there. Can't miss any meetings.
And Laura, I'm not sure if this is common for all secretaries to do all the tasks that you are doing. So I feel like you have to multitask in all the meetings, right? Like drop a link, listen to what's being said, record that, then go back. So I feel like someone who's good at managing a few things.
Yeah, I mean, right. An ideal universe, like people would submit their motions in writing, but that never happens. So then I'm just writing everyone's motions for them as they talk them through. It's been a journey, but yes, I agree. Multitasking is important. We next have the treasurer. They also do not take a leave of absence. They also receive the same stipend as the secretary. I do believe this one, I guess it depends. The secretary, I don't find it that time consuming outside of the meeting times, because I am a pretty fast and accurate writer. But the treasurer does have to go to the office. I'm not sure if it's weekly, maybe Sarah, but they go pretty often to sign documents and also serve as the chief fiduciary of the union. So they do have a lot of responsibility, and they receive a $500 a month stipend for fulfilling those duties. We do pay for an accountant, so they work with the accountant. They have to follow all the laws that come to, dealing with finances in a union. They work with the board of trustees, who is another elected position, to propose a budget for each fiscal year. And then some of these other duties that are in the bylaws, are mostly automated now, but it is something they look for. So I guess what might we be looking for in a treasurer?
I'm not trying to sound funny, someone who's honest and won't steal. Honesty, integrity, all that good stuff.
No, I'm looking for someone who's willing to change what's been done. I feel like we get very stuck in processes when it comes to finances, and like we did it before, so we're just going to do it again. And that's just not helping our union grow and thrive. All right, so that's the treasurer. Okay, so now we're getting to other members of the executive board. We have what are known as area vice presidents. They receive no leave of absence and there is no stipend. They do serve as voting members of the WTU executive board. Now, here is the trick about this position, which I didn't learn until I got on the bylaws committee. They are supposed to chair committees composed of elected representatives and volunteer members about their functional units. So we have an area vice president of high school, middle school, elementary school, special education, CTE, career, the career tech people, related service providers. I think that's it. I think there's 7. So this could be a role that has a bit more responsibility than has currently been put into practice. At least since my time on the board, which has been for 6 years, we have not had area vice presidents conduct these committees. So this could be an opportunity for somebody who does want to step up a little bit more than just kind of the average board member who just attends a monthly meeting and who does want to build membership communication to kind of the top level of the WTU, as well as help, assist other building reps. So you see here it says assisting building reps and school chapter advisory committee. So like this could be a chance to take more responsibility without leaving the classroom. So it is a good opportunity to have, formal power within the organization and get to maybe step up and do something that, at least so far, in the past 6 years at least, has not been done. So I'd say I'm looking for like a go-getter. Somebody who like wants to actually, set something up that really isn't set up right now, and make it happen. I don't know, is there other things that you might look for in this position? Committed member voice. I guess Steve can speak to this, Sarah can speak to this. We have some current and former members of the WTU executive board, but I find it to be operating in a bit of a vacuum, where people use their personal experiences and personal connections, which is fine, but there isn't too much effort by most of the board members to go above and beyond that and to be actively reaching out to other members and learning what they think and what they want. And so people are largely voting on their personal thoughts, which they're entitled to do, but it's not doing much to build up communication and power within our whole membership. It's kind of concentrating power in a small space of 21 people. I don't
I
know.
would just second that, Laura, just because, you know, from us being in the system so long, you get to know that just because you have an issue at your school is not always an issue somewhere else. And you can be completely in the dark about an issue at another school. So I think what you're mentioning about like making sure reaching out to a wide spectrum of educators from new to new to the profession, which we tend to not have a lot of involvement from, all the way to the more seasoned folks.
Yeah. So this would be one that if you have a little more time than for 3 to 4 hours a month and want to really try to build something in the union, this might be a good position to try for. Next, we have members at large. This is what I first served as. I know Steve was a member at large for high school as well. Not sure, Sarah, if this was also your position. There's nothing really mentioned in the bylaws about this, so there's no real role except to, you know, show up to an executive board meeting that happens once a month on the first Saturday of the month. And currently that's electronic. So like you don't even have to like drive into the WTU office. So this is really arguably, at least in terms of your formal responsibility, a low time commitment, to say the least. The meetings can, maybe 2 to 3 hours is generous. They're probably more like 3 to 4, depending on how it's going, but usually in the beginning it's 2 to 3, then they start to get longer. As people start to maybe fracture and arguments happen. But you really don't have to do much else. Obviously, the hope would be you would want to participate in WTU committees and you would want to be taking, you know, your role seriously and reaching out to people in your, you know, in your area, elementary, middle, high, etc. But it's not a requirement in terms of like the position. Really, the only official requirement is that monthly meeting. We do sometimes have like little trainings kind of beginning of the month, or like beginning of the term, but usually the WTU is good about getting, you know, you the I'm in premium or leave of absence, you know, from work for a day. So, you know, this is a really good potential position for someone who just wants to, I'd say, learn more about the WTU from the inside and have a voice at the board level. Which is 21 people who do have things that they control when it comes to like the operations of the union. Someone interested in operations doesn't have a lot of time. All right, so that is the WTU Executive Board. The president and the general vice president serve on the executive board, have leave of absences. Everyone else does not have a leave of absence, but are voting members of the executive board and have varying roles and duties. If you were to run as a slate, one note is that no 2 members can be from the same school and serve on the same slate. We then have the Board of Trustees who can also run at the district level, and they can run with the slate with the executive board. But as you will note, they do not have, they don't have a vote on the executive board. They're not members of the executive board. Though sometimes they do attend the meetings to potentially report. This is all about financial transparency. So they have the right to examine all financial records, receipts, and expenditures, etc. They are the ones who attest the accuracy of our bank accounts, and they work with the treasurer to provide quarterly reports to the executive board and the union office. I will say that this often has not been happening, in my opinion, at all. In my 6 years, the Board of Trustees kind of gets active at the very beginning of an election term and then drops off the map never to be seen or heard from again in their official capacity. So maybe for people who really do want that extra layer of checks and balances, who are interested in finances and oversight, this might be for you. They don't meet even as often as the executive board, though they are invited to the board meetings. It's not required that they attend. It's more of a quarterly thing, and then they would hopefully work with the treasurer. Okay, so we got a couple questions. So one question was, do slates typically cover these positions top to bottom? Full slates do. In the last election, there were 2 full slates, the Liz Davis slate and the Saunders slate. So a full slate does, but it's not a requirement. A slate does not have to cover the positions top to bottom. They often do. Slate wants to get elected and have consolidated their power and be able to work together to, enact, I guess, their vision. I've never seen, and someone else can certainly correct me, because I've only been in the union for the 15 years. I have not seen a slate that did not involve the president and vice president. So that would be different if it was focused on other levels of the board. But it's allowed. It says slate balloting. It doesn't say anything else beyond you're allowed to form a slate. And that's always been allowed to be partial. So I don't know if anyone has seen it in their time in the WTU. I just personally have not. All right, now we got a lot of positions. There's a lot of things open this year. So I'll try to move a little more quickly. We then have the elections committee. So the elections committee are the ones who conduct the general and special elections of the organization. That includes runoffs and recalls. And we're seeing them a lot right now. They also conduct quorum counts and administer votes in representative assemblies and general members meetings. So they do have a role all year and every year. And it is a very important one when it comes to the integrity of our union and its operation, when it comes to, voting and making sure that it's fair. The elections committee really is the group that makes it happen. So I do think, kind of like all of our other ones, we want people who are honest, committed to democracy. I would hope open to change, which is proven to be tough. If there's no other questions on that, we can move from them. These are the positions you probably know well, so we don't necessarily need to go into them. But as I mentioned before, I really truly believe the building representatives are the backbone of the Washington Teachers Union. They are the bridge between the schools and the union on the district level. Many people, and I should say, you can serve as both. Like you can serve in a district position and as building rep. It's obviously, piling on to a big plate because the building reps have a big plate, but many members of the executive board also serve as building reps. That's pretty common. I do, Steve did, and we were far from alone on the executive board. It's obviously not a requirement, but it just means you can serve in your school and you can serve district wide at any level. Those do not, you can run for both. So building reps just do play a huge role both in their school and outside of it. And I think just for the purposes of this training session, unless somebody wants me to go in depth, I won't go in depth on the in-school ones. Since hopefully we are largely familiar with them. One that I do want to highlight is the delegate to the rep assembly. This is maybe a less well-known role at the school level. So these are voted on at your local school. You do not have to serve as the building rep and take on all those big responsibilities. But like the building rep, you get to attend the monthly rep assembly meetings and you get to vote on union policy. One thing to note is that every school is guaranteed a voting building rep. Not every school is guaranteed a delegate or multiple delegates because it's based on the number of full dues paying members in your building. So for example, Woodson, we have a little over 50 full dues paying members currently. And so we have 2 delegates. So I think really it's probably should be 1 building rep, 1 delegate, but we have 2 delegates currently. So they get elected in our building, separately, and they get to attend the rep assembly meeting, which is considered the governing body of the Washington Teachers Union, which would mean it was higher than the executive board when it comes to setting policies. We then, of course, have our school-based committees, school chapter advisory committee, local school advisory team, and personnel committee. And those should hopefully all be operational at your school. And you can, again, serve on those as well as serving in a district-wide capacity if you feel so inclined. Last one is the Washington Metro Labor Council delegate. So there are, I believe, 6 of us. This is a monthly meeting with other unions across the DMV. It meets usually, I think, the 3rd Tuesday of the month. It is similar to being a delegate to the rep assembly, in my opinion. We occasionally vote on business. We often are just hearing reports. It is now being conducted virtually, which does make it a lot easier to attend. It's really interesting if you're interested in learning more about the broader labor community and meeting people from across the district and all sorts of different roles and responsibilities, and hearing what they're going through and hearing what the latest strike is. Like, there is like a lot to learn. I'd say there's not, at least this level, a huge opportunity to make changes. That being said, I've enjoyed attending those meetings and the people I get to know. And there are people in the Metro Labor Council who want to make it less top down and want to give more power to the members. So there is kind of opportunity to be a part of that at the citywide level and just get to know people around the district and participate in their politics and everything there. And usually it's kind of an easy one to win because there's multiple seats. It's not something people pay a lot of attention to. And I think they're not even requiring you gather signatures. You just sign up and then you're running. So it's also, you can run for this as well as other positions. I'm one of the current Metro Labor Council delegates. I do plan to run for it again because I'm enjoying serving. All right. So that was a lot. Next, we have the timeline. So what we see here at the timeline, we have the at this latest March Rep Assembly meeting, the nomination petitions were made available. That is from the bylaws. And this is just language from the bylaws largely. The nominating petitions, which I will talk about more, are due the last working day in April. That'll be the 29th at 5 p.m. And they require 20 full dues member signatures. The ballots are expected to be mailed no later than 15 days after that, so mid-May. Then it is expected to be a majority cast. It doesn't say when the vote has to happen. So that's usually set by the elections committee in conjunction with the executive board. I've often seen it be in June. You have to win a majority to hold the position. If no one wins a majority, there will be a runoff of the top 2, and it will follow the same voting procedures as in the same ballot company will mail it out. mail it back. When Liz ran the first time, she ended up in a runoff and then she won. And
And
by
Laura,
first they would take office. Yeah.
And Laura, I just wanted to add something about slate voting because I had an interesting entry into being on the executive board. Actually ran on a slate where that slate did not win necessarily, but some people on the slate got enough votes to be put into those positions on the executive board. So I know that's the case with everyone underneath vice president and president, but is that the case with those positions as well, even though I guess that's highly unlikely?
I believe it is. I mean, I think this is what it says, right? A majority of ballots cast shall determine the election. So yes, I think if it was a lower position and no one won a majority, then there would be a runoff of the top two.
Thank you.
Sorry, was there another question? No. All right, so the voting process, as of now, it will be by mail only to your home address, and it must be mailed back in time to be counted. You have to follow the directions extremely precisely. I've witnessed many a ballot get thrown out because people didn't sign the back. I have witnessed ballots get thrown out because they have what's known as an overcount or overvote, where maybe they voted for a slate at the top and then they tried to vote for something else in there. That means nothing counts at all. Like that ballot was toast. People who didn't use like the appropriate utensil. It is strict and they just toss. And if it's late, it's not even getting opened. Because the ballots get counted in front of observers from each campaign. So currently we're in the process of trying to add an electronic return option. So far that is going down in flames. We had an executive board meeting on Monday in the hopes of passing a first part of an amendment to the bylaws that the president said was required in order to make that kind of change. It failed, so that's not happening that way. The next option is gathering 800 signatures from members, but I'll just be honest, sitting in that meeting, they said the elections committee would need to set the rules for that they would need to be followed. And because there are no rules for that, because it's not been done, the likelihood that any method we chose would be accepted is almost zero, in my opinion. So I think we should bank on this being a mail-in process only, and all the complications that may or may not come from that. All right, so now for if you want to run. The elections committee does now have a page up on the WTU website. It went up last week. So you're definitely open to going to that, and I can, email this out to everyone, the PowerPoint, if you want to, look at it more later. The rules and the bylaws are you need 20 signatures from dues paying members. The elections committee is very rigorous in verifying these dues paying members. If someone thought they were a dues paying member and they are not, then their signature will not be counted. If they wrote a nickname and it's not the name the union has on file, their signature will not be counted. They are very, 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 very strict. So my suggestion to anyone who wants to enter this process, you should get at least double. 25 is what they recommend. I say go for double. One, because it pushes you to get out to more people and get your name out there. And that's only good for, trying to win an election. But two, then you don't have to worry when it comes to signature verification, because the likelihood that over half of your signatures are bad would hopefully be low. But you could also go for even more. I know Liz Davis turned in hundreds just to maybe show what she was able to do. But I think it's just better to be safe than sorry. You have to be in on time. They are extremely strict on this. They will not broker you walking in at 5:05. I would not turn them in April 29th. I would turn them in earlier. Like I'd say set a date, the 28th is like your latest deadline. Because things have occurred and challenges have been made and lost when standing in line, and questions of when did you get in line, when didn't you? If you're like trying to do that whole I was in line by 5, I would just not engage with it. I would be done early and I would get them in early. That way you don't have to worry. You don't have to raise your blood pressure at all. Just get them in. I'm going to show you what they look like. See if that works. Maybe. Here it comes. So this is from the W2 website. So you would check the box that you're running for. If you are running for more than one, you need to submit more than one petition. You have to write your name out. It can be someone else. But you'd say like you put your name in school, you put the position, and then whoever's kind of filling it out can do it for you. But you can also just sign it yourself. But if you have, friends who are doing it on your behalf at other schools, you still need to sign all of them yourself in the end, but you can have nominators gathering the petitions. You have to make sure people print legibly. Like I said, if they can't read it, if it's a nickname, if there's anything off about it, they will toss it and they have to sign. And you can see they do give 25 spaces, but you could also just create, 2 for yourself and then try to fill both. Again, if you're setting a goal that's that much higher than what's required and you don't make it, but you still at least have, over 20, then you're probably safe. But I would just say really try to shoot for that 40. And then you really don't have to worry. You have to submit them in person. Like you got to bring them in. Someone can bring it in for you. So like if you're doing a slate and you've checked over all the petitions, they could bring in the petition for you. And in fact, if you're running as a slate, the elections committee does suggest that you bring them all together, though it's not required. They will give you a copy of them back with like a stamp, and all of this is spelled out at the official website. So that's nominations. That's how you get on the ballot. Can't run if you're not on the ballot. So you have to go through this process. It is open already. And at the end of next month, it closes. Then for campaigning, there is nothing that I've seen on the website so far that gives the official rules for campaigning. So what I'm telling you is what I remember from the past. And anyone else who remembers things from the past, feel free to add on. So if you're campaigning, a few things that you need to know. One, W2 presidential candidates get to submit a statement that will get sent to all members. That is in the bylaws, so that will happen. You cannot use the W2 logo in any printed or online campaign materials. You cannot use the W2 logo. It's not yours to use. It's also not used by the current president if running for re-election. You cannot use the W2 logo in any election campaign materials. You cannot campaign during work hours. That would include social media posts and emails. As far as and then current elected officials cannot campaign while on the job. So if you are, if I cannot campaign while I'm serving in my role as secretary, right? That would be inappropriate. That goes for the president and general vice president as well. They cannot use the WTU staff to participate in their campaigns, etc. When it comes to emails, historically, the email list has been inaccessible and not used for elections beyond official elections material set out by the elections committee. That can include those little blurbs about the WTU presidential candidates as mentioned in the bylaws. But really only the elections committee gets access to the email list, and they are expected to be neutral. That being said, in the past, the mailing list has been possible to have access to. You never get to see it, but for a fixed price that the elections committee negotiates with a vendor, you can create a flyer or a postcard that can then get sent out through that vendor to all WTU members, again, for a fixed price that all campaigns would have the same access to. So there has been that opportunity. Those usually come more in, April, May is when the elections committee gives out those kinds of opportunities. We know that the rep assembly passed, a motion that the elections committee would also conduct a debate, but I believe that's just the presidential candidates, maybe more, and a meet and greet. And the last meeting they said they were working on that and would have more information, probably when they also talk about these other rules. Question of, can candidates put flyers on cars in school parking lots? My understanding is yes, parking lots have been considered largely fair game, though the elections committee would probably need to spell that out. My understanding has been that it doesn't have to be off campus because this isn't like politics for the government, right? This isn't like a mayoral campaign. This is internal union elections. So you can, now the elections committee may tell us we're wrong. No, I'm wrong, excuse me. But my understanding has been you can talk to fellow members about the election. You can have them sign your petition and all of that in the building, just not during school hours. So like before your official start time and after your official end time. And lunches have typically been allowed for union business. So you could possibly do it at lunch. But I'm not 100% sure about the lunch one, because what I remember from last time was that basically, I think they said like 8 to 3:30 was kind of off limits. And then you could do what you needed to do. But it's not like the Hatch Act, which is like the federal law about union membership in elections, does not apply to the union election itself. So you do have a bit more freedom and wiggle room to be involved, but the elections committee will spell that out. So I would maybe be careful about campaigning before they put out their rules, and really just focus on your nomination petitions and making sure you're getting those 40 member signatures. But you only officially need 20. All right, last bit here, just from me, is DCCORE. So DCCORE, we're a new caucus. We have not been through a WTU election as a caucus. But our commitment, and what we've talked about at least, is that our commitment is to democracy, into increasing turnout, increasing voter information, increasing access to candidates, increasing information. What we've discussed so far, though we're still working on it ourselves, is that for all candidates, we will provide a page on our website where we're going to collect information and share it with all WTU members in a neutral manner, in a manner that we would not put our own spin on anything. We'd really just say like, oh, here's the candidate's website, here's their flyer, like we have a few questions we plan to ask that we would allow people to like write their own little piece to have up on the website. And that's expected for all positions, not just president, because we really do believe all the positions are important. We are also in discussion of creating our own endorsement process. We have not figured out exactly how that's going to look and how it's going to work. But it could mean that we are willing to endorse candidates for different positions if we believe you align with our mission and vision and our commitment to organizing. And then if endorsed, you'd receive our support, volunteers, and we have, some money for social media and printed materials. But we're still in the works on that, so none of that is kind of set in stone. But that's kind of where we're at, and that's part of why we're doing this training and we're recording it, so that really it's just to inform WTU members of what they can do and help plug people in so that more and more people are involved running and voting. So that's kind of it. I'll stop sharing and just we can open it up for questions or comments. Was it helpful? Was it super long and boring? I don't know.
It was helpful. It was really succinct and it was a lot of information. So thank you.
Is anyone thinking of running? Any positions calling your name? I can put up the, I'll put up this slide again. We've got our positions analysis. Oops, what's it? It's running away. I think there's obviously always a lot of huge opportunity for change with building reps. And then another big opportunity, I think, for change with the executive board area vice presidents. But really, any of these positions, you can make change if you want to make change. So whenever you think you could grab, I started out as a executive board at large, and I definitely tried to do a lot of kind of the area vice president work from that position and made some headway, maybe not as much as I'd hoped, but it's possible. All right, well, I do hope it was useful. Feel free to reach out and we'll be hopefully doing kind of more of these, and like I said, recording it, and we'll kind of cut it up into smaller pieces so that people can watch the parts that are useful to them.
Laura, quick question.
Yeah.
Because we don't have district-wide PDs, we're not really interacting with people outside of our buildings as much in person. Mm-hmm. Has DCCORE or even the union thought about ways where people who want to run but are at small schools can find ways to connect and, cast a wide net and gather, not just like get the word out, but also gather signatures?
Yeah, I think that's certainly something that we can look at, like facilitating like this core, like a nominee gathering session and try to like get 40 people to show up. So like pass around your petition, gather signatures, check if you're a dues paying member, like maybe, I don't know, like a picnic or something outside.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking, is like some kind of signing party where you know, more people can gather.
Mhm.
It could be almost like a meet and greet and a signing party, right?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I think, the reason like the union, right, in the past would have like rep assemblies or things like that where people could run around and do it. I think what we often see is that it's just definitely a setup, or like the way it's set up is that slates have an advantage, right? Because you can then get your slate together and say, hey, slate, we're going to meet here. Everyone sign each other's petition. If you have a full slate, that means those signatures alone should get you on there. Because they can't not be a full dues paying member to run. So like you'd have a problem if you had someone who wasn't a dues paying member trying to get on your slate. So yeah, I think you're right. That's a good facilitation role that CORE can play. That's still neutral because it's just open. I think the other like methods are like you ask, a friend in another school to basically fill it out on your behalf, and then they just have to get it to you for you to sign. So it could be, you like, if you know 2 other people running, you basically say, hey, when I'm getting my signatures, I'll have someone fill out 3 different petitions for, me, you, and you. You do it for me, and then we'll just gather, we'll each, trade our petitions, sign our own, and then turn them in. Like, but I like the idea of giving an opportunity to like hang out and relax and also sign. All right. I don't know if there's any other questions, comments, or ideas. Well, thanks a lot for coming. And hopefully we can get the word out to more people about opportunities to run and have a real robust election.
Thanks, Laura.
Yep.
And Laura, are you running?